Welcome back, pop stars, to PURSUiT Poly TV, our podcast. And you already know who we are, but we're really excited today because we have a very special guest joining us, and that is Miss Jessica. Am I saying this right? Levity?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Jessica Levity Daylover. It's a stage name.
Very cool. I love it. So we are just super blessed because we reached out and Jessica was open to joining us on the podcast. Yeah. And I know that you have such an amazing voice in the community right now. You know, we've been
Mel's been fading out for a while, just to let you know.
I definitely have.
We were just hooked as soon as we saw your content.
So. Yeah, like a long ass time ago. Like I think before we even really had made our own page.
Yeah, it was a minute ago.
We were already following you. So yeah, super pumped to have you. So thank you.
Thank you. I feel like we got started around the same time.
Okay. Yeah, like a year and a half ago-ish.
Yeah, because I was like, who are these hot ass people doing all these TikTok dances?
That is amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So we are like really dying to, I guess, learn more about you. You know, obviously we see the things that you share about polyamory, and, you know, all of the things that you do share are just so relatable and so helpful. And I think you create a very safe and welcome space like on your page, you know, and I think that's something that we have migrated and kind of like gotten to be excited about when we see your posts. So tell us like more about you. Give us like a little background on who Jessica is and how you kind of like got to this journey with polyamory.
Well, first of all, I love talking about myself, so that will be no problem. So let's see, where do I even start? I'm 36, queer, bisexual, demisexual, identify as a demisexual slut, which is a term that I coined. Check out the hashtag. I'm neurodivergent, just recently discovered autistic and ADHD. And now I'm sort of like unpacking my whole life with that new lens. I've been polyamorous. I've been with my husband / baby daddy since 2009. I don't even know. Is that like 12 years?
A long time, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I don't even know. We got married in 2013, and just a few months before that became polyamorous. So we've been polyamorous for like 9 years. It was definitely one of those stories where like I was introduced to the concept. Well, we were introduced to the concept through friends that I was like, I think they're hitting on us. And I was immediately like, oh, I'm ready right now. Like I heard the term and like my soul set on fire. And I immediately was like, oh, I can start right now.
I love that.
And that, of course, freaked my husband out. And the more excited I got, the more afraid he got. And so it was one of those things where it was just like, okay, well, we have to talk about it. And then I, of course, wanted to talk about it all the time, which annoyed him and like pushed him away. But then him refusing to talk about it pushed me away. And we call that first year the Dark Ages. Well, actually, we just wrote a book, and like we would each write a different chapter, and then we'd edit each other's chapters. And my husband's like, since when do we call it the Dark Ages? And I was like, oh, well, I've been calling it that for a long time.
Now you're privy to my inner terms.
But it really was. I was like, bitch, be real.
Right.
That shit was hard.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
How long was that into your relationship when this all was kind of happening? How long had you guys been together?
So we got together in 2009. and 2013, the summer of 2013 is when some friends started telling us about polyamory. And I instantly was like, this is who I am. Let's do it right now. Let's start right now. So we were 4 years in, and then like we didn't know any polyamorous people. The online content almost a decade ago was nowhere near what it is now. So you start to spiral, and because you need to dismantle all that cultural programming, you're like, I'm wrong, this is wrong, like this is gonna fail. And so it was brutal. And I then like fell hardcore in love with what I call twin flame connection, which is just like super intense type of very deeply karmic connections for me. Not ideal for the first like relationship. definitely drove that off a cliff is kind of what I call it. So I just like didn't know how to drive NRE, didn't know how to like love someone that intensely in a healthy way, but then also still honor my partner who wasn't being awesome either because he wasn't enjoying the process.
Yeah.
So it was just ugly. And we both did a lot of stupid things. The culture would definitely point more of a finger at me because I was the one engaging, in polyamory and sort of dragging him along with me, which implies I didn't have his consent, which I did.
Right. Right.
But I think the culture would be more supportive of him, and like constantly people were like, oh, I feel so bad for Joe and blah, blah, blah. But really, if you look at it from a neutral perspective, we were both doing shitty things. Like we were both being selfish and fearful and engaging in toxic controlling behaviors. Yeah. And so now 10 years later, I know how to handle NRE in a way that's like more sustainable and less all consuming. And he obviously is fully in at this point. So we are an example of a story where one person in the couple did not want to open, but we made it to the other side. Or at least when he was afraid to open, he'd probably be like, that's not true.
Right.
Fear for sure. I
feel that. So now you guys are both open, and your husband also has his own like separate relationship. Can you tell us more about what the dynamic looks like right now?
Yes. Well, our dynamic is very interesting right now because after we had our second baby in March of 2021, so like 15 months ago, I came out to him. Thank you. I came out to him a couple months postpartum as no longer wanting to be in a sexual relationship with him, which had been true for a very long time. I actually, to be honest, don't think we were ever sexually compatible. But I knew without a doubt that he was my soulmate. No, I still know that without a doubt. We are the definition of a married couple. Like we are so romantically in love, so the best partners for each other. In episode 8 of the second season of our podcast, Remodeled, for anyone listening to this right now that's like, what did she just fucking say? Yes. We go into full details of this. So if you're like looking, and it's our second most downloaded episode ever, which tells me awesome. A lot of people are interested in this story. I think it resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a story tale as old as time of like people losing sexual attraction after babies, after long-term relationship. I think it's normal, and I wish that we would normalize it. I don't think that every couple needs to divorce just because that attraction has ended. I think that we should celebrate that some relationships can evolve in this way. But also, like I said, ours is a little bit related to, I don't think that we were ever compatible, and I didn't know that because I was following a script of, as a wife, this is what marriage is, and you have to do it even if you don't want to. And there's a lot I'm trying to unpack there, especially as a demisexual, how often in my life I've had sex that I didn't want to have because I was supposed to. So there's a lot there. So a lot of people are like, oh, so you're polyamorous because you don't have sex with each other. And it's like, no. We were polyamorous way before that, but it helps. And it's the reason that we're still able to be together, right? Because otherwise we would have to dismantle the relationship because I am trying to have sex with other people.
Right. I feel that. That's amazing. And it's so cool to hear, like you said, about kind of the transformation and how you guys kind of got to where you are today, because that is something that we get asked all the time. Definitely. It's like people that are kind of new to this territory that are starting to try to, get resources and get understanding. That was kind of leading me to the next question, which was like, what is it that you would tell like people who are just starting polyamory? Yeah. Like, what is your biggest, I know that's probably one of the most common questions you get asked, but, when you're talking about, especially a couple coming into polyamory, I think it's valuable to hear what you think.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and I do actually have an answer for this. So the thing that people have to understand about polyamory is that it is going to bring up all of your shit immediately. So I actually have a course coming up called Polyamory and the Invitation to Look at Your Shit.
That's awesome.
You can, you can sign up, remodeledlove.com, just sign up for our email list. And so the image that I get is an image of like a sifter through the sand, right? So polyamory is the sifter, and it's going to go through this sand, and it's going to pull up all the shit inside of you, and that's going to be core wounds, inner child trauma, attachment style, and codependent mind games that you play. And so and it's going to happen immediately. It's going to happen from the first conversation. It's not just going to start when the first person goes on the date. It's going to start within the first conversation, the first time you get triggered.
Right.
The first time that you feel like, oh, wait, I want to do this, but also I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Your shit's going to come out. And I know people with more trauma, and definitely people with certain personality disorders or neurodivergence. We struggle differently. And so I have a lot of shadow, that's what I call that, around wanting to manipulate. And I'm really good at it. And so I've really, just to be a good person, but polyamory sort of forced it. Like, I really had to look at my proclivity to manipulate people when I'm in fear and call myself out on that, because my husband doesn't have a manipulative bone in his body, he doesn't catch it, right? And so he can be taken advantage of by people who manipulate easily, and I manipulate easily based on my childhood trauma of having to do that in order to fucking survive in my home.
Right.
And so polyamory forced me to look at my shadow side and look at these toxic, dysfunctional behaviors that I have, to try to control situation, to try to feel powerful. In the line of coaching that I'm trained in, we call it imitation power. So it's not real power, but it's imitation power. And I'm going to use manipulation to just take a quick hit of it because I'm feeling out of control. I'm feeling out of power. Right. And that shit really comes out. And so you have to be prepared to look in the mirror and look at your shit. Because I think in monogamy, it's just the nature of the setup that you can get into a relationship with someone who like is the yin to your dysfunctional yang, right? And so you can, so you can act dysfunctionally for 50 years. And it's dysfunctional, but it works for 50 years. But the second that you bring in a third person and triangulate that, like shit just gets really bad really quickly. So that's my advice to anyone starting on this journey.
I love that. That is an amazing answer. I definitely feel like here I want Sammy to.
Well, I kind of want to go back to something that you said, because you said you coined the phrase or the term demisexual slut, right?
Demi slut.
Slut. What? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that and
demisexual slut?
Demisexual slut.
I love it.
Sure. So demisexual, by definition, is somebody who cannot experience sexual attraction until they experience emotional connection. My definition of demisexual is a little different. It was actually given to me by my metamor, that there's a switch inside of me of sexual attraction, and sometimes that switches on, and sometimes that switches off, and I'm not in control of the switch. And so sometimes I do have an emotional connection with someone, and my switch is not on, and it's very frustrating. Deep inside, I am a hoe. Like, I just want to be the biggest hoe ever. I resent my demisexuality. If I had to give a speech on why I love my demisexuality, like I could definitely find reasons that it's great, blah, blah, blah. But mostly I hate it. And all of my sexual fantasies entail mostly not being one. And I just feel like my demisexuality is a cage trapping my inner slut. And so when I do have a connection, I'd be considered libido demisexual, because once my switch is on, it's game over. Like, we don't need to leave the house. we can order food. I'm not interested in doing anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's the demisexual slut paradox.
I love that.
I love that.
I really, really love that.
Yeah,
I can relate to so many parts
I can relate
of
to
that.
that. So many parts of that as
For
well.
real. Especially the switch being on or off.
Yeah.
It's such an inexplicable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it makes you question yourself, I think. Like
Definitely.
when you're not, your switch isn't on and you feel like for all the right reasons it should be on, right? And I'm like, why the fuck aren't you on right now? Like, this is everything you asked for. It's everything you wanted, and then you just can't explain it.
God.
So that's something.
Girl, yes. And I feel like so much of my life has been, well, once I figured out I was a demisexual, for like about 6 months, I was doing a lot of analyzing of like, well, is my switch not on because this person actually makes me feel vulnerable and I have a fear of being vulnerable, so my switch is off, and like psychoanalyzing why my switch is on or off. And my new thing is just recognizing it's on or it's off, and it ends there. It's been really freeing. It might be time for me soon to like start re-looking at stuff, but having an answer doesn't really seem to do anything.
Yeah.
So even if it's like, oh, well, I'm just afraid to be vulnerable with that person, so my switch is off. Okay, well, that doesn't solve the problem. Like, I have healing to do.
It's like, cool, okay, thanks, but I'm still here. So
well, and what I have found is that my switch tends to be the most on for toxic connections.
Oh,
and I'm not necessarily saying toxic
That
people.
is relatable.
That's relatable.
You're like literally
Jeez.
singing my soul right
Like,
now. Why
all of it. It's
why?
like, it's,
I don't know.
it's hit so hard.
You're like, yeah, that's been definitely something that we've been encountering too. And I think that the thing about it is what we were talking about recently is like, at least you're recognizing that ability. You have that ability and that clarity to see it now. And yes, like, your tendency is to go back to that feeling or that choice, but at least, I guess I see it now. Now I know about it. I don't know. Why won't it go away? Why won't I stop being toxic bitches? I don't get it. I don't know.
I don't know if I'm attracted to you, that is a red flag in and of itself. Like, but no, totally. And like, sometimes I think on the one hand, there's just the really obvious, like the obviously toxic person is hot and we just have a cultural, it's like dark and sexy. But I think beyond that too, there are people that I really don't notice are toxic and I'm attracted to them. And then it's more just that we find out that our connection is toxic and I'm like 2 months in and I'm like, son of a bitch. I tend to be really attracted to emotionally unavailable people. Which as a demisexual is a total paradox because I need the emotional connection. And so then I end up frustrated that I can't get them to connect with me in the way that I'm looking for. But I saw this great TikTok that was like, people who are afraid of emotional availability attract people who are emotionally unavailable so that we can continue to convince ourselves that they're the problem.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really us. And so I identify as being extremely emotionally available because it's like my favorite thing. My Venus is in Scorpio, so like I'm just like a deep, dark, sapphic bitch. But so I identify as emotionally available, but when you look at the evidence, I'm really not.
I feel that. I mean, I think that definitely resonates as well. Just knowing that, you tend to go to someone for these specific reasons and they're really, rooted in something that we have, that we're carrying.
Right.
But I think the biggest pinnacle of all the things that you're sharing about yourself and about your journey is, the inner work that's coming along with it. Like no one's showing up to polyamory without doing that work. And if they are, it's going to, like you said, come out no matter what. And it's going to be, a magnifying glass put on those things. So I think for me, I've started to feel like my polyamory is also a part of my spirituality. It's like a part of my evolution of my spirit. And a lot of the things you were saying too about, just learning how you relate to people and that teaching you about yourself is such a amazing, like, viewpoint and perspective.
For sure.
Do you have any of these other?
So yeah, I just wanted to know, like, what's been the most challenging part of your polyamorous journey so far?
Well, it's interesting because when people ask that question, and not saying that you are, but normally when people ask that question, they are asking from a place of like, in the ways that people struggle with polyamory,
Right.
how have you
Right.
struggled? But my answer these days, I don't struggle with polyamory itself. What I struggle with is the intersections
Mm.
of polyamory and parenthood and
Mhm.
capitalism in this
Yeah.
fucking shit show.
Yeah.
And just how, and this is what a lot of what our book is about, is how difficult it is to genuinely be out here like, yo, we are polyamorous, we are good to go, we do not struggle, we're like root each other on. And like, I don't have a partner right now. My husband doesn't have, I mean, he has a long distance, like he has a commit partner, but
Yeah.
neither of us have anything going on right now. We get on these apps and I don't have the energy to connect with people. Once I connect, to continue conversations. My 15-month-old still wakes up 3 times a night.
Mhm.
Um, and like our first baby started sleeping through the night at 4 months old.
Oh,
Mm.
wow.
And our 15-month-old has never slept through the night,
Oh,
just to
Oh,
paint a
wow.
wow.
picture. So like we're just like barely hanging on.
Right.
And what it takes to build connection, you guys know what it's like. It's fucking draining
It's
Yeah.
to
so
be on these fucking apps and go on these dates and like somebody flakes, somebody like whatever. Like it's just really hard to be a polyamorous parent right
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy because that literally was my next question
Mhm.
too, but I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think is kind of like the handbook? How do you navigate and operate, and what do you do differently because you're a parent in this space? How does that affect you in the way that you operate and move around, and how can you give, I guess, more advice in that way to people that are parents, because I think there is definitely got to be a ton of
Mhm.
things working against you in that realm already as a polyamorous person, but then to bring in the parental aspect.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said the word navigate because the title of our new book literally is Polyamory and Parenthood Navigating Non-Monogamy as Parents of Young Children. So
Love
plug for
that.
our book. It's available for pre-order right now. It comes out June 30th officially, so just a couple weeks. And the whole book
Very.
is exactly what you just asked me. So we go through we have a section in the book called Green Light, Yellow Light, Red Light. And green light is just like a list of all of the amazing things about polyamory and parenthood, and the way that parenting makes polyamory really fun, and the way that polyamory makes parenting really fun. It's just all these wonderful aspects. And then the yellow light aspects are the things that kind of give you pause, the ways that they make each other harder, but kind of in a growth inducing way. And you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's hard, but it makes me a better person and a better parent. And then the red light is just the honest to God, really hard shit that, like, if you're going to quit polyamory, for lack of a better phrase, it's going to be on a red light issue
Okay.
where there's no explaining it, there's no reframing it. It's just hard and
Yeah.
it just sucks. And, like, for an example, a red light issue is like being, like if you're dating someone who doesn't have kids and then they're dating someone who doesn't have kids. And, like, for example, like I was dating somebody who just met this girl and they packed up for a weekend and went on a ski trip on like a day's notice. And it's like, cool.
Mm.
I'm feeling super good about that at home with my teething baby and my screaming
Right.
toddler. And like the juxtaposition, you're just like staring in the face of the freedom of people, the autonomy of your polyamorous brethren who don't have kids,
Right.
the lack of understanding from people, because there's this paradox that we talk about where you're either dating someone who doesn't have kids and they don't understand your life, or you're dating someone who does have kids and you never get to see each other
Right.
because you both have kids.
Right.
That is so real. I
Yeah.
mean, it's got to be even more, difficult in those moments when you're like introducing, like, how do you introduce a new partner, like, and when do you introduce a partner to your child, and especially if, like you said, this partner doesn't have kids, it's like, it makes
Right.
it such a unique situation. And do you feel like ever, you know, obviously that you get judged as a polyamorous person, but do you feel like you're getting more judgment from like parents, other parents, or, you know, and how does that feel and what does it look like?
Yeah, being a polyamorous parent, you're stigmatized from the culture in the same way that all polyamorous people are, but there's even stigma from within the community itself. And then, of course, from outside the community, it's just like, well, that, I mean, I guess that lifestyle could be acceptable until you have kids. And so it's like double stigma from outside. Yeah, it fucking sucks, which is so stupid to me because if you think about it, like I have one of my more viral TikToks is that one where I'm like acting out a conversation where someone's like, "Are you guys going to stop that polyamory thing when you have kids?" And I'm like, "Why would I do that?" And they're like, "Because that's so unhealthy for the children." And I'm like, "Don't you have 4 parents?" And they're like, "Well, right, but that's because they're divorced and I have step parents. And it's okay because everyone hates each other." And it's
right. You're like, do not see the correlation.
Right. And so it's like our brains can conceive of these multi-parented families as long as divorce is involved.
Yeah.
But the concept that no, just this group of adults all love each other and are all opted into the children equally, that is somehow not acceptable. It does not make sense. Yeah. It literally doesn't make sense. And so my question is always like, what are you triggered on?
Yeah.
Because people who get upset at this, it's so not rational to me. And of course, my neurodivergent brain is like, hello, why do you not see this the way that I see it? But it really doesn't make sense. I mean, all that you have is like religion. Religion is probably the only thing you could throw at it to say why step parents are okay, but polyamorous families are not.
Right.
But even then, it's a stretch.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I definitely feel like, you know, for us moving forward as we visualize having kids and, you know, being polyamorous parents, like I feel like it's going to be so simple when it comes to talking to the kids about it, because the kids are just going to get it. It's going to be like, okay, here's your other mom, you know, or here's another dad, or here's, you know what I mean? This person's name, insert here, and this is just someone we love. Or like, I feel like kids are just open. Right. So I feel like the biggest problem was probably coming from those other people around you. Not
or even like your support system. Like, how is that with your family and your friends? Like, you know, people that really knew you.
Same.
Yeah. So we have a chapter with 5 sections on introducing your kids to polyamory in our book. We're hugely passionate about it. And I think, you know, it's so interesting because we met a family through our city's Buy Nothing group on Facebook because we're socialists, and they had very similar values. They live in the neighborhood, and so we started a preschool cooperative. So we just trade childcare one day for one day, and it's been great. We just hit our year mark. It's great, and you know the parents give off a very parental vibe, and so my kid calls them mama and dada, which is what their own kids call them, and then I'm mommy and my husband is daddy. Like, it's really just that simple. It's so funny. I have to tell you guys something. I have like major family drama going down right now, mostly just like, you know, when you wake up to like how dysfunctional your family is and you're like, wait a minute. It's like millennials everywhere right now are like, I don't want to play this game anymore, and the whole family's like, anyway, so one of the issues in my family, I have step parents on both sides, and they're both offended when I introduce them as a step parent, right? They just want me to say mom or dad. They want me to stop like identifying like step in front of it because it like hurts their feelings or something. Okay. And I'm just like, so y'all have the concept,
right?
That it's so important for you to be considered a real parent, but you cannot and will not like support my family in the way that we,
wow,
that's fucking hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It is, and it's really
Yeah.
tough, especially when you are someone, I can only imagine, who is so vocal and outspoken, especially over this last year and a half as you've been, expanding in this community. Like, it is tough, to be like, hey, I'm out here, I'm all the way out here, and not have, necessarily your family understand or really be on board. So I can get that. I mean, I definitely can relate. And I think at the same time, that's what's so beautiful about the polyamorous community, is that, like, so far we've connected. So like you said, we don't have any fucking friends. Like, our friends are literally the people that we meet online, and on through our social media. And that's been such an amazing support, because it's just validated more of, the ways that we're feeling. And I think that's a big piece of advice to newcomers to polyamory for me, is like, do not talk to anyone about polyamory who is not open to it, because they are going to tell you that no matter what is going wrong,
it's always going to be
polyamorous.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's a great thing for people who are parents and now just starting this journey, maybe after becoming a parent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what do you think would be, from a wider space now, like zooming out a little bit, what do you think is like the biggest issue? This is such a loaded question, by the way, so just shoot me later. What do you think the biggest issue that's like facing the poly community is right now? Because we've gotten so far, right? We're moving in a direction, and things are happening, and people are speaking, and we're giving more resources, and there's education, and there's studying, and there's more acceptance, right? What is still like our biggest mountain? What's like the thing we're really hitting a wall with right now? What's the hardest thing for our community to get more?
I love that question. I have several answers.
I love
First
that.
of all, gatekeeping. Gatekeeping. There's just a lot of really toxic, even from content creators that I respect.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself, just as I would hope that somebody wouldn't write me off completely for like one opinion, I have to remember that even sometimes that creators I really respect can have an opinion that I think is a bad take. But there's creators that I really respect who have this, if you have to engage in blank, you're not ready for polyamory.
Right.
And, I'm really out here with my, like, that is unrealistic. So in a world in which we are not all victims of compulsory monogamy and compulsory heterosexuality, maybe you have something to your opinion, but the reality is we are all fucking victims to this shit. And so some of us have had, I have clients who are in their 60s. They have been in a relationship for 40 plus years. They have only known monogamy. It's not like they knew that they didn't even know it's a
They didn't even know there was another option.
Yeah.
Right. So if they, need to engage in some problematic practices, and I do say problematic, as long as they are full disclosuring on their dating profiles immediately upon connecting with someone, like, hey, we engage in whatever, veto power, and that person still chooses to opt in, then I think it's ethical, and I think it's realistic that some people need to take these baby steps, whereas you have other gatekeepers out here talking about, oh, if you have to engage in veto power, then you're not ready for polyamory. Well, guess what? Like, maybe for Gen Z, but the rest of us gotta figure it out. Now, if you hide that, if you hide that from people, then you're a piece of shit, and that's it doesn't even mean you're not ready for polyamory. It just means you're a piece of shit, and you're
a fucking shitty person. Right.
But like, so my favorite content creator, I stand this woman so hard, Avita Sawyers. That is the queen. I think she is writing the gospel of polyamory, and I subscribe to her school of thought, which is let grown folks do what they want. And so as long as everyone in the situation is a grown folk and they are consciously and informedly opting in and consenting, then the situation's fine, and we need to get out of here with this whole, if you have to do this, you're not ready for polyamory. I think it's correct. I think my other answer to the biggest problem right now is the lack of intersectionality, as always. And part of that is, if you have privilege, you don't need to understand privilege. It's a privilege to not understand privilege. And so there's a lot of a lack of intersectionality in the community and understanding the different oppressive systems that people are. Shit, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did I lose you?
No, you're
You're
good.
good.
Okay, am I back? Okay. The lack of intersectionality and understanding the privileges that it takes to be polyamorous. Like, there's this weird paradox where, like, it requires privilege to be polyamorous because you need to be safe enough to be out, that somebody could see you on a dating app and it wouldn't cause you to lose your job or have you be killed, right? Or, lose your family or lose access to resources. It takes privilege and resources to be able to afford to go on dates and travel and pay for dinners, whatever. But it's also a privilege to not be polyamorous, because polyamory leads to resource sharing and it can actually relieve the burden of survival and capitalism. So there's an interesting paradox there. I think one of my favorite accounts is Anti-Mononormative, which is run by an Indigenous queer woman. And she is doing the work of how most of us, even the content creators and educators who are teaching about polyamory, are still doing it from a mononormative lens. So we're still talking about polyamory, we're thinking about polyamory, we're acting and behaving within polyamory from a mononormative space. And it's really problematic and it's super hard to understand. It's a very academic and intellectualized concept. And so there are some really annoying keepers who post really righteous, people don't understand this stuff. Well, it takes privilege to fucking understand this stuff. It is really academic shit. That said, you need to be following these queer Indigenous content creators who are talking about it, because it's super interesting that monogamy is a total colonialist concept and that it's an oppressive system. And so I think one of the things is, for a lot of people, it's just polyamory is when you're married and then you decide let's bring in other people, and you're still doing it from this very, monogamous point of view. And you think as long as you are successfully dating other people, you have figured out polyamory, but you really have not figured out polyamory until you've gone anti-colonial with your understanding of it. There we go. Mic drop.
I love that. I love that. and for both of those points, wow, floored. They were both such great points. I mean, to speak to the first one, I think it would be like you said, unrealistic to expect that people aren't going to fumble and fall and make mistakes as they evolve.
And there's going to be a learning curve. Right?
And there's a learning curve when it comes to polyamory, because it is an information that we're all just handed when we, we're given the relationship escalator and we're giving these, like you said, ideas about monogamy. Right. So that really resonates for Sammy and I think especially, and you can speak to how it makes you feel, but when we entered the space, you know what I mean? It was definitely a lot of maybe not support. There was definitely moments where we didn't feel supported. And,
well, even from people that we were looking up to at the time.
Yeah.
You're like, oh shit.
That we were really inspired by. And so I feel like, and even in that, in so far as we had a lot more information, even when we entered into sharing about, coming out on our platform. And so I think that's been part of our goal with our page, is that okay, there's going to be a certain audience that gets attracted to seeing our content. It's going to be probably other heteronormative couples that are oh, okay, that's what they're doing. How are they doing it? And so my best move is I can't go back and, change how I got to where I got here, but I got here, you know what I'm saying? And I have the information and now I want to share it. Right. So I think that is something that really hits hard for us, because that's been our journey. We didn't come into this fucking perfect, we didn't come into all the information about ourselves. It's been part of the journey, and that's important for people to know. And I think important for people to feel welcomed into the community, because otherwise that will turn them away too. It's oh, well, I thought I could come here and be myself, but I can't really be myself here yet, because you know what I'm saying? So I love that point. And then the second point being, that we have so many layers to break down of this, polyamory versus monogamy thing, and the intersectionality that comes along with that. It's amazing information, such good information for the people here.
I want to ask one like fun question before we get back into like, I know you.
Yeah, I know. These are my questions, by the way.
But I'm just curious just to know like what is Jessica's type? Like
ooh,
what type of partner are you
what's
looking
your
for?
type?
Just because you said that you don't have a partner right now. So
I do want to know.
Curious, yeah. What's
a good fucking question?
Yeah, you know, it's good.
You mean besides toxic?
Yeah, yeah, right. We got that one. We're the same on that one.
So it actually changes very differently between men and women. I am such a femme for femme top for women. Like my last girlfriend, like we would try to switch and we would do it for like 30 seconds. And then the next thing I know, I'd be topping again. And we'd be like, wait, how did that happen? I'd be like, I literally don't know.
Like this. I don't know.
I literally cannot help it. I should probably just find. I like identify as a switch, but I should probably just find a pillow princess because
I love that.
But I'm very femme for femme. And then for men or masks, I just need somebody who can put a bitch in her place. You know what I'm saying? Like the opposite. Like. I'm a brat. I love me a brat tamer. I just learned, though, that I use bratting as a means of avoiding true surrender and true submission. And so it's not a totally healthy thing for me to do as far as like using kink for healing, which makes a ton of sense. But it turns me on so much. So one of my kink like educators told me that I'm looking for a service top. So somebody who will let me dom them into telling them how to dom me. Very little tricky mind game there, right? But definitely like, I like a little bit of dommy energy. I love queer men. Oh my God, so sexy. And then as far as like personality, like if I would love somebody more radically left than me. Like if we can go to dinner and talk some radical politics, I'm talking radical left, social ecology, like anybody who can stimulate my mind. I used to think that a spiritual like match was the most important thing, and I do prefer it because I am very spiritual. Metaphysics is one of my special interests. I'm a metaphysical minister. But it's not as important to me as political alignment is. Like, I could date somebody who thinks my woo-ness is weird. I cannot date somebody who is not at least left.
Right.
That is real shit. I agree with you.
I feel that so hard.
Oh gosh.
It's fucked up because I feel like, you know, in one of those relationships where we had that kind of toxic attraction, there were these like same things you're talking about, the core issues.
Well, we were blinded
by the fucking shit. I don't know what.
Part of it was the NRE, and then part of it was we weren't asking the right questions because, you know, everything else was just hitting on the level as far as like, you know, physical attraction.
Was she hot?
She was so. We start asking her real ass shit. We're like, wait a second. Oh, why didn't we start asking these questions at the beginning? Maybe we lead with like politics and.
But that'll make you ugly real quick. I'll tell you that much right now. But yeah. So.
Yeah. No. Like. Well, and it's funny because like my husband came home from a date one time and she identifies as liberal, but he came home and he like slammed the door and he was like, she owns property and she likes being a landlord.
Oh,
and I was like, oh
no. I love him so much. I love him.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
But you know,
How was that the first time you ever saw your husband like come back from a date? Like how did
are you a compersion type of person or do you not feel compersion? Because you know there's people that say they don't feel it.
Oh, I experience it so much with my husband. I only struggle with it with new partners. If like, especially when I'm in NRE, I will definitely struggle with jealousy and envy. With my husband, it's a lot of compersion. I get annoyed if he starts doing annoying shit, and that might affect my compersion. But like,
right.
Like if he starts acting aloof or anything, like that shit annoys me. But.
Yeah, like with Sammy, when he's been like, you know, on NRE or like has a crush, he kind of floats around the house like a fucking like what is her name, like Cinderella. You know how Cinderella's like birds?
Like a little
He's like a
bird,
little
yeah.
hummingbird. He just comes around the house and does.
That's so cute.
I'm like, dude.
She hates it though.
No, but I don't hate it. I love it. But he will knock shit over because he's so like all over. And so I just will see a trail of, you know, all the things that like, or I just know where he's been, you know, in the house because he's kind of on this like hummingbird energy. But it is super cute. I've always been a compersion person.
Yeah,
I'm like a weird kink compersion. Like I'm like into it that you know, all the way in 100%.
That's awesome. That's a nice quality. What city are you guys in?
We're in Atlanta. We live in Atlanta now, but we moved here from LA. How about you?
I'm in Reno.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay. We used to live in Vegas.
Yeah, my
It's
mom.
random, right?
I love that. I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
place. Speaking of, you know, being able to kind of, it's a little bit like the wild, wild west out there, right? I mean, you kind of, that is really like.
Well, Reno is so funny because it's the Wild West, but it's also Burning Man.
Oh,
Right.
That's right.
So there's a bit of an identity crisis. Yeah. So it's like very queer, hippie, but also Burning Man, which can go so far left it becomes alt-right, you know. There's a lot of like vibes over virus people here, and like, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But it's beautiful. I mean, the
where you're
Sierras
from
are
originally?
fucking beautiful.
Is that
No,
where
I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
no, the mountains. I miss seeing the mountains out there for sure when we lived in California and in Vegas.
Mhm.
But that's so cool. I think is it something that you said you don't really have anybody in your town, right? Like where are your poly friends? You have your friends? Is there a community that you have there? Like what do we need to
Because you
all
said you were
move to
introduced
Reno,
to
or
poly
like
through a
where
friend,
can we
right?
find friends? That's basically what I'm asking.
We're going to do the whole like buy a piece of land thing, which literally is my dream. And I know everyone says that, but legit. You know, there is a community here. I am weird now about engaging with community outside of the digital space because there's a lot of expectation of me
Yes.
because of the parasocial relationship, which I'm sure you guys have experienced that as well. And so it's, and I also think I've become addicted to the online space in probably an unhealthy way. And so I don't like in-person interactions where people know me. I'm getting ready to start this A Demisexual Goes to a Sex Party chapter of my life and start going to like sex parties. And like I'm having trouble with the fact that people are going to know me there. And like that makes me uncomfortable. But there actually is there's a decent millennial-led polyamorous space in Reno, and the kind of boomer generation, they can be kind of sketchy and they need to be checked sometimes because there's a lot of misogyny in that era, and that they think that they don't have the consent culture that the millennials and Gen X and Gen Z have. And so it's not bad. I've never really connected with it because, I don't know. I was just always weirded out by meetups.
Yeah. I think the expectation in general, like people think that because you're poly, or if you share even being polyamorous with other people, like we were just talking about this with, you know, friends that we have that are kind of virtual friends with other. We were like, oh, I don't know if we want to hang out with them because I think they might think that we want to fuck them. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't want to fuck them. You know, I just want to be their friend. You know, so there is also that kind of. I think a lot of people have experienced at least that expectation. I'm not sure. You know, the other ones being that you're an influencer and all those kind of things too. But
and the parasocial relationship is weird, and I love it and I hate it, and people will be like, oh, you're coming through this city, like we have to hang out, like
Right.
bitch, I do not know you,
right, like I really don't. I don't, and we haven't talked that much.
and I'm giving you, you know how like sex workers give you the girlfriend experience, right? Like I'm giving you the friend experience, especially if you're paying, you know, for like, and so like, and it's not fake, like, but I'm definitely giving you an experience, like,
Of course.
when your time is up, I'm not going home with you as a sex worker, right? And so like I'm giving you a friend experience, but people can get really, especially when you have a diary-esque page like we do, where you guys are like, this is our journey and this is who we are, it really makes people feel like they know you and they do, but also you don't know me and
Right.
I don't owe you anything. And I have huge triggers around expectation energy. So
That's huge.
I think so too. Yeah.
So when it comes to like your dating history, have you had a lot of experience with like dating other people that identify as polyamorous, or have most of your partners been people that haven't had much experience with non-monogamy?
Are you the gateway into polyamory?
Have you been the gateway?
That you dated?
yeah, no, I have a really bad history, and part of it is Reno's a mid-sized city. There's been a huge influx of Silicon Valley bitches like over the hill in the last few years. And so because of that, the polyam community, like when I first got on dating apps, like 8 years ago, fucking nobody. And now you get on, you're like, holy crap, there are some people on here.
Yeah.
And so polyamory is growing. And then also the Bay Area is coming to Reno, which is very poly. So part of it is there just weren't that many people. There's another part of it where I'm a sucker for chemistry, especially as a demisexual. And so if you've never been poly before, but we have chemistry, I have a hard time walking away from that.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, I'm sure that there is some deeply subconscious need that I have to like be a teacher or be in control or like, I don't know, it's problematic.
I feel you, girl. I feel you 100%. But yeah, but there's part of that too, and you can't really help it either way, one way or the other. But yeah, chemistry is chemistry, and that is that switch we were talking about. And if that switch is turned on, your lack of polyamory experience is not going to stop me. That is for sure. That is 100% true.
Yeah, I definitely. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, the first time that I dated an actually polyamorous person who was just like, and had a nesting partner and like we're just good. Like it was just like the first person who was polyamorous and like they had a great relationship and I loved my metamor. Like I definitely dated them longer than I think our connection was had a value for, just because it was so nice to date a polyamorous person and just be able to date and not have to like talk about polyamory.
Yeah. And be like, and like break it down and be like, and this is what it is, and here's a book, you can come back to the next date and read it if you want to.
Yeah.
I
totally.
So is kitchen table polyamory, or like where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell me that. What is your perfect scenario? What is your manifestation 5 years from now? We're meeting back up for another get together between the three of us or whatever. Where are you at?
Running a sex dungeon as my fully embodied tantric sex goddess, no longer a demisexual.
Awesome. I love that.
I would really love to. I've never had a long-term relationship, so I have like a 2-3 month curse. That's what I call it. I should probably stop calling it that.
I think I have the fucking
We have
curse,
the
yo.
exact
I
same.
think I have the fucking curse.
Yeah, I would like to have broken that. I would really like to have someone who is deeply invested in being a part of my family. That might not necessarily mean co-nesting, but I'm open to it. But definitely someone who wants to be an active part of my family, of my children's lives, help with the burden of parenting under capitalism, not financially necessarily, but as far as resources and time and effort and things like that. And I would just like really like to be coasting for once, like just be able to enjoy multiple relationships and not be on the prowl or looking, just like be able to enjoy them.
Yes.
I love that. That's beautiful. And as far as like where you see yourself in your career, you're reading a book. You're writing a book. It's coming out on June 30th. Is that what you said? June 30th?
Mm-hmm.
So make sure everyone's checking out the book. But what are the other things that you're hoping to bring, with your creative expression in the community?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think I'm having a lot of visions of having essentially like a masterclass platform, like the brand masterclass.
Yeah.
I think that I already know that that's what I'm going to do. So as soon as this book comes out, I'm going to immediately turn some of the courses I've been working on into downloadable courses. And then I want to start producing, because like before Remodeled Love, I am a producer entertainer, and I just know the most unbelievably talented people. And it just, I could tell that my higher power wanted me to be a producer because of the people that they put into my life. And so I just want to start producing my friends, which is what I've always done. I've made a career out of producing my friends. And so not all of it will be polyamory related, but I just really like this brand called Remodeled Love. I think my husband and I have done a really good job of just making the Daylovers the brand. And so like polyamory is kind of one of our passions, but we have more to us than that. My husband is writing, no one knows this. My husband is writing a live show. So it's the live show of Remodeled Love. It's so really cool. Funny. It's basically a 2-person stand-up show, but it's educational and so taking our comedy career back on the road and kind of do like a live Remodeled Love tour.
That's unbelievable.
It's so crazy cool. Because we just finished doing our podcast with Dana and Daniel, Dana and the Wolf. And it's so interesting to me. I'm starting to see a pattern here because there's so many creatives in this space that are polyamorous. I wonder what it is about our artistic minds that bring us closer to polyamory, and then we all meet up in the space. So it's so cool to hear that you guys have, like, I knew you did the production and you produced and all that stuff, but I can definitely see hopefully more collabs coming in the future between Remodeled Love and Pursuit of Poly for sure.
Yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to it. It's an honor to chat with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, you've been amazing. I know that our audience is going to benefit so much from hearing all the things that you shared, and we hope to have you back again with us in the future.
Sure.
If you want to, will you like leave all your handles and where people can follow you and your podcast and all the things that they need to do?
Thank you for asking. The best thing you can do is go to remodeledlove.com because it has links to everything. And because I'm ADHD, I can't like stick to one brand. So on Remodeled Love and Twitter, or on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Remodeled Love. On TikTok, I'm Home Slice Productions, which is my broader production company under which I create all kinds of stuff. And then on YouTube, I'm Jessica Levity. I haven't really done much with my YouTube yet, but I would like to. And that's all my stuff. Go to remodeledlove.com, pre-order our book, and join our email list so that you can stay up to date every time we drop something new.
Yes, I know that Sammy and I are on it for sure.
Yes. And can't wait just to see everything unfold. And we're going to be there front row when that show does happen.
Yes, you already know. Amazing, we're going to be whooping and hollering and all types of things. We would love to see it. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for being a light in the community. And we can't wait to connect with you again soon.
For sure.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Mwah.
Mwah. This is a true Hollywood beat.